All right, welcome back to our circuit program of Why We Are Christians. We're talking to Laura Perry. She is in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and she has a fabulous book out. I'm hoping to you guys all get it. It's called Transgender to Transformed. And by the way, you can go to transgender to transformed.com and you'll see Laura's website. I'm going to have that up there for you to see on the screen toward the end of the program. Okay, Laura, here we go. So you've gotten to the point where you've started to take hormones. You have this very interesting relationship with a man who's wanting to transgender to a woman. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's pick up the story. What happened next?
Yeah, it was interesting too, because I was saying at the end of the last program that God used him in a lot of ways. And one other way that he really used him is he was like a mirror to me, because I could see the truth in him that I couldn't see in myself. And so I began to realize, even though I didn't know it about myself, I began to realize that he was just dressing as a woman. And I kept thinking, why is this not real for him? No matter how much makeup he puts on, no matter how much, the wigs he puts on and all these other fake things. I was like, it's never real, and I thought, well, maybe it's just something about him, but I know it's real for me.
Okay.
And so, but I loved him anyway. He was so good to me. And, but in 2008, I'd had my name legally changed, and that was a big, exciting moment. Yes, it's finally real. And, I can't believe it, but
you changed your name?
Yeah, legally to Jacob Perry. And
Jacob, you like Jacob. You picked a biblical name.
Yes. I didn't think of it as a biblical name at the time. Honestly, I liked the name Jake. And so I went by Jake. And it's so weird now. I mean, when I first left the lifestyle 4 years ago, that was deeply ingrained in me as an identity. But now it just sounds so foreign to say that. But that was my legal name at the time. And I really kept thinking, like, I know it's not real yet, because I knew I was doing kind of all these fake things, but like one day it's going to be real. And so I really thought after my chest surgery, that's when I was going to be legally male and I wouldn't have these breasts anymore. And I thought, that's when it will be real. And I was all excited, and I knew that I couldn't afford it yet, but I was having severe back problems from the chest binders. And they were, I was wearing them almost 24 hours a day, and they were just destroying my back. And so I decided that at any cost, I had to go do this. And I maxed out all my credit cards. I took out a surgery loan, and I went to San Francisco, actually, to one of the world's most renowned plastic surgeons that was well known for doing these transgender surgeries. And I basically, through caution of the wind, spent every dime I had to do this. And after my surgery, I remember thinking, like, I was just on top of the world. I thought this was everything I'd ever wanted. I was legally male. And I went back to work a few weeks later, and my boss, that was a lesbian at the time, she was very pro-LGBT. She had helped me plan the trip. She thought this was wonderful. And she got in my face one day and she said, look, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you're moping around here. You're depressed. You're not working as hard. You're unmotivated. And I don't know what's wrong, but I want the old Jake back. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm just still recovering or whatever. I just kind of blew her off. But I went home that night and it bothered me. And I thought, what is she seeing in me that I'm not seeing in myself? And when I was finally honest with myself, I realized that I had been really depressed, because even though I liked the physical results, I'd realized that my surgery hadn't made me a man. And I hadn't wanted to admit that, because I wanted it to be real so badly. And I thought, well, maybe another year of hormones, maybe once the facial hair grows in more fully, because it was growing in by that time, but not real full, not enough to really have a beard yet.
Now, I've seen a photo of you, I believe, on twoprisms.com, and you've got a beard.
Yeah.
There's a picture of you with a beard.
Yeah, I did later, but it didn't, at that time, it wasn't growing in well enough yet. It took several years. And I think it just depends on the person. what I didn't know at the time was it's more, the testosterone has more of an effect generally on girls that are much more thin and have less body fat, especially if they already have a lot of muscle. The testosterone may be more effective. Um, for a lot of girls that have a little more body fat, it takes, not only does it take longer, but I actually gained weight. A lot of people will lose weight on it, or well, that's what they tell you. So they keep telling me, oh, you're going to get so ripped and you're going to be so strong and all these things. And, you know, you see all these pictures of these really, really in shape girls that are living as men, and that's what you want. But the reality is, for most of them, is they end up looking, being much more overweight. Their face even starts to look very bloated. And so I was looking much more round in my face, even though I had sort of a squared jawline, but my cheeks were getting very puffy, and you could tell it looked, I remember just being really frustrated by all of this, you know,
The
but
top surgery is generally the word that's used
mm,
to that. Then bottom surgery is something altogether different, and I don't think you
yeah.
went through that.
No, I wanted it really badly. Well, I had had all the female organs removed. So I actually had two surgeries. So I had a full hysterectomy and oophorectomy, which is the ovaries. And I really thought at that time that was going to finally fix it, because after my chest surgery, I realized it hadn't been real. I thought, well, it's because I still have all these female hormones and I have these female organs. Once I get rid of all that, then it will be real. And when that didn't fix it, I was considering going for the bottom surgery. And I was really angry when I started to look at the surgeries. First of all, I was never going to be able to afford it. It would have cost me about $100,000. No insurance covered it at the time. But on top of that, um, over 60%, and I don't know if they've improved this any, but at least at the time, and I don't think it's improved much, over 60% will likely never have sexual feeling again,
Right. I
because they
understand
just
that.
destroy the genitals.
Right.
And, you know, the likelihood of ever having pleasurable sex again was not good. And on top of that, it would have been very fake. They have to artificially, and well, everything is about it is just fake. I don't want to go into detail, but on top of that, there were, I didn't know then. I'm so thankful the Lord spared me. I know from an inside source that this story is not public, but there's a girl that I've heard of that has had 31 corrective surgeries.
At 31 what?
Corrective surgeries,
Wow.
because they are so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Very difficult. I understand. I've
Yeah.
done quite a bit of research. I have my own book on transgender and a new one coming out. But uh, it's a crisis for so many people, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's maddening. I mean, it drove me absolutely crazy. I became obsessed with trying to make this real. And everything in life became about trying to make this real. And I was so frustrated because no matter what I was doing, no matter how many hormones I was taking, no matter how many surgeries I'd had, and I remember thinking at one point I had a prosthetic genital device I was using, and I thought, you know, even if this was surgically attached to me, even if like the surgery that they would have done, I mean, it takes part of your arm muscle, but even if they had created this, I knew it was still going to be fake. And I began to realize with horror everything I was doing about my to myself, that it was still never going to be real. And I just remember being so devastated because I realized that I was not ever going to be a man. But there was so much pain in even thinking about being female, that I thought, well, this is the best it's ever going to get. At least people think I'm a man.
Okay.
At least, at least I don't have to remember being a girl. And I kept trying to just bury the memories of being a girl. I honestly, I wanted to erase the existence of Laura, but it began to torment me. I lived in what I called stealth. In other words, I didn't tell anyone that I was transgender. I was not openly transgender. And so I kept changing jobs the more I would transition to where less and less people knew. And I finally had a new job where no one knew I was transgender, and I thought I would have complete freedom. But what had promised to be freedom had really become my prison cell, because now I'm in an environment where no one knows I'm transgender and I'm only perceived as male. And so then if I would tell a story about childhood, I would catch myself and it would be like, wait a minute, I couldn't have been in Girl Scouts. I had to have been in Boy Scouts. Or I couldn't have played softball. I had to have played baseball. And these things. And I would catch myself in lies all the time. And people would look at me so confused. And I remember my boss caught me in a big lie one time because I had met a girl out at the smoking area on break. And she was getting ready to marry this guy and I realized in horror, this was a very abusive boyfriend of mine from high school. And she was getting ready to marry him. And so I freaked out and went and told my boss, and she looked at me with the most bewildered look. And she said, Jake, do you swing both ways? And I was like, what? And it hadn't dawned on me that here I am talking about me as a supposedly straight man, talking about my ex-boyfriend that this girl's getting ready to marry. And I remember I was like, how do I get out of this? And it was those kind of things that really began to torment me just night and day. And this was a constant torment. I just can't even describe to people to be constantly reminded of who you really are and yet trying to get away from it.
And you can make all the surgical changes, but you can't change the chromosome.
Absolutely.
XY is going to be XY and XX is going to be XX.
Yep. And I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't know anything about biology and science. And I didn't understand that. I really thought that taking the hormones would somehow transform me into being a man.
Yeah. How did you move here to a place where everything changed again for you?
Well, it was the intervention of God. And I look back and I know that my mom and my dad and many, many people with them from the church, and my mom who was now teaching a Bible study, and I know they were praying for me. I look back and there were so many ways along the road that God was praying for me, God was intervening. There was one, just for example, I remember so clearly. I was driving down the road early on in my transition, probably the first year, and I was listening to Metallica and Godsmack and like all these just horrible bands. And I was like, I'm so sick of this music. I'm so tired of being angry. And I just realized this music was making me angry and depressed all the time. And for whatever reason, I can't explain on this earth, I turned off that music and turned on Christian music for the first time in years. And I had this incredible encounter with God. I didn't get saved at that moment, but I was just, it's like the Spirit of God came on me. And I just began weeping and weeping. And so I quit listening to that music. And so there were things like that along the road. God was giving me all kinds of dreams. I would have dreams about being left behind when Jesus would come back. It was just crazy. The amount of way I had dreams all the time, almost daily, about waking up as like being exposed, like I had never actually transitioned. Like I would wake up in the dream and I would have long hair and I didn't realize it, and I'd be like at school or something. My mom was teaching a Bible study and she had asked me to make a website for her Bible study. I didn't have any interest in the Bible, but I said, okay, I'll make a website. And as I did, I remember I was going to summarize each lesson for the website. And so I began to read the lessons and I just began to get curious. She was teaching things that I had never heard. All I'd ever heard about the Bible was God's rules and, the do's and don'ts, all these things. But all of a sudden, the Bible was just coming to life to me. And I'm hearing about, for example, one of the things that fascinated with me was how Jesus was a type, or how Joseph was a type of Christ. And I was so fascinated, I called and asked her about this. And so she began to kind of explain this to me. And I said, well, that's cool. But the next day I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I called her and asked her another question. And so this went on for 6 months. And I called her every single day, just asking her questions. And I realized that my mom had been so transformed, because when I was little, she was, and she'll tell you this in her own testimony, she was very much kind of a legalistic Pharisee. And we grew up under such strict rules. But now she was loving and full of faith and grace, and just, she was so different. And when I saw the change in my mother, it's really at that moment that I knew the gospel was true. And I went home and I gave my life to Christ, and I really was repenting of all my sin, but I really didn't believe that God would save me. So I was in this place of, I felt, I I was kind of caught in between. I don't really know how to describe it other than I sort of poured out all these confessions, but I just felt sort of empty because I didn't believe God would save me. And so the next couple of days, I was really wrestling. And I had this amazing, I was praying and I said, God, I want to be used by you again, but I don't know where to start. And I'll save the story for the book, but I had this radical encounter with God. And I was so transformed. And I knew that God had saved me. And I put my faith fully and completely in him. And I was so transformed. Like I look back and I knew I was a new creation. All my desires began to change. Scripture and everything began flooding back, things I'd learned in childhood. I went back to my office and I began listening to all these hymns. So I was just completely changed. And over the next year and a half, I really thought that I was going to be a man of God because I didn't think there was anything I could do about being transgender. I knew it wasn't God's will, but I didn't know what to do about it. But he began to pursue me and he began to show me that that wasn't his will for me. He began to show me that that's not who I was. And I kept thinking, okay, God, I recognize this isn't your will, but what am I supposed to do about it? You know, I'm stuck this way. And, but he began to convict me more and more. And I remember in particular one night he said, if you stood before me tonight, what name would I call? I was like, oh, wait a minute, you know, I am legally Jacob, you know, I've changed my name and I realize this is not, you know, what I was born as, but, you know, what difference does the name make? But he reminded me of John chapter 1, where it says, Jesus Christ himself is the creator. He said, you cannot claim to love me and yet reject my creation. But in the most loving voice I've ever heard in all my life, he whispered to me and he said, let me tell you who you are. And that's really what began to free me. And it was like I was blown away by the reality that God had created me with an identity, that it wasn't, I didn't have to go searching for it anymore. I think so many people are just searching and searching for their identity and it's never fulfilling. But to realize that the God of all the universe had created me with an identity and with a plan and a purpose, that really began to free me. But I didn't know how to fix it. And so in one sense, I was comforted by that, but it was like, God, I don't know what to do about this. And he didn't tell me immediately. I didn't know that God telling me, let me tell you who you are, was going to take several years to sort of unpack all this. And so I was so miserable and I was so convicted. I was just under heavy, heavy conviction. I began to beg the Lord with all my heart to just take my life because I knew I could not live as transgender, but I saw no way out. And I was sobbing. I was coming home every night and just sobbing my eyes out. And I finally, one night, I pictured myself in this deep, dark pit I couldn't get out of. And I could see the light at the top, but I just had no way to reach it. And I was trying to figure out how to fix myself for God, you know. And he reminded me of the scripture where it says, if anyone will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his own soul? Or what shall he give in exchange for his soul? It was Matthew 16:24-26. And I had a clear vision of Jesus Christ himself getting down on one knee. He reached his hand down into this pit and he said, do you trust me? And I knew he was asking me to walk away from everything. And I'm like, you know, I didn't have any plan. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I could not, I was so miserable. I knew I could not continue to live that way. I walked away from my partner, my job, that identity, everything. I sold everything. I got rid of all my male clothes and I moved home with almost nothing and no plan other than I was going to obey God. And I honestly thought I was going to be miserable the rest of my life, but I thought at least I won't be living in sin. My mom told me when I came home the verse out of Joel 2:25 where it says the Lord will restore the years the locust has eaten. Not only has he restored my relationship with my family, he's restored my female identity. And I, for the first time in my life, I really love being feminine. And I've become so feminine and girly now, and I just absolutely love it. And he's given me all kinds of ministry opportunities. He's brought so much healing through many different avenues, through discipleship, through being involved with other girls at the church. At one time, a couple of years ago, he gave me a job at the church where I was one of the female assistants, and there were 7 of us girls. Each minister had an assistant, and we were like a team, and we did everything together, and I was just like one of the girls. And that was incredibly healing to me. You know, and eventually he brought me on staff here at First Stone Ministries, and I'm
Now, First Stone Ministries. Tell us a little bit
mhm.
about First Stone Ministries.
Yeah, First Stone Ministries is primarily a discipleship and pastoral care ministry. We do counseling. We also have a lot of online resources if you're out of this area. But we have small groups and just have, it's an incredible ministry to minister to those who want help. You know, unlike what the people say about conversion therapy that no one practices, you know, that's a ruse term that they have made up to scare people. We don't do any of that. You know, we're not forcing anyone. We only help those that want help, but there are people that genuinely want help. And they've, Stephen has my director, Stephen Black, he has a book that was published last year. Well, his book was called Freedom Realized, but then there was a survey that they published showing the incredible results that this ministry has had. And I've forgotten the exact percentage, but a very high percentage of people have gone on to no longer identify as homosexual. Many have gotten married and gone on to live very happy lives and free of the bondage of homosexuality.
Now, that's
And
First Stone
yep,
Ministries. In other
yes,
words,
First
he
Stone
who is
Ministries.
without sin cast the first stone.
That's right.
That's where that comes from.
It is, yeah. And so the premise is, you know, we are not casting stones at anyone. We all have sinned. But our tagline, the rest of that verse or that chapter says, Jesus also said, "Go and sin no more." You
Right.
know, so just because we're not casting stones doesn't mean it's okay to live in sin. You know, and we want to help you out of this. And it's not arbitrary. God didn't make up these rules just to keep people from having fun. I've learned now coming out of this, God's plan for me was so much better. And being healed in this identity, I've found so much peace and freedom. There was no peace in trying to live as transgender. Trying to live as something that you're not was a living hell. And I wanted it so bad to be real, but it never was. But now I have so much peace and so much joy,
Yeah.
and not that life is always easy, you know, it's tough sometimes.
Sure.
There's a lot of pushback against this kind of ministry,
Oh, yeah.
but you quoted a verse earlier when we were not recording, but you said, you know, in this world we will have tribulation, but Jesus said, be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. So when we give our life to Christ, you know, it's not always easy. There's a lot of hard days, but I tell you, it's so fun serving the Lord. I'm so thankful he rescued me.
You're right. And so the love your book, Laura. I've read it all the way through. I don't know how I got that book, but somehow ended up in my hands. And as soon as I read it, I said, I gotta contact Laura Perry. And I did that several months ago. And finally, we have an opportunity to do this, to do our interview on why we are Christians.
Yeah.
So contemporarily, there is a huge push, particularly among girls, to transgender. Why do you suppose that is?
You know, and it's weird because when I first came out of this lifestyle, I was confused. I could see that the Lord was really raising up my story, and I really didn't understand why, because most transgenders at the time were men living as women. There weren't as many women, at least not that I knew of. And all of a sudden it's exploded, and there are far more girls now. It's like 70% girls, and I think that number is climbing. In fact, they have now coined a term, rapid onset gender dysphoria, because a lot of these girls have never dealt with it, and then all of a sudden they're going into this. And I think it's for a few reasons. One, I think there are broken relationships at home. Most transgenders, not most, it used to be almost always the case that there was an issue with parents. I think because of social media and other things, there are many more influences now. Many of these girls, I think, are struggling with peers. That is we used to, even back when I was in middle school, every girl would tell you that middle school is such a rough age for girls. Girls are vicious to each other. They're so jealous of each other, and they're so insecure about themselves, and they put other girls down. And it's a nightmare living as a girl in middle school for many girls. And then you throw into that puberty, and puberty for a girl, I mean, it's rough for everybody, but starting female cycles and it's terrifying. It's scary. It's gross. It's, you know, and it's painful. There's so many things, and you start hearing, you know, experiencing all these things. And I think girls are like, forget this. I don't want to be a girl. And they go on social media and they see these guys that are just ripped with all these muscles, and they're, you know, talking about how wonderful this is, and, you know, I was really a girl and now I'm a guy, but they don't know the internal battle. They, all they see, and I've heard quotes from so many, you know, all I saw was the pictures and the videos and all these things, and I believed it, but the reality is inside they're miserable. You know,
Yes.
maybe not for the first year or so as they begin transition. It's fun, it's exciting, there's so many things to look forward to. But as you begin to realize it's not real, it really begins to torment you. And as we mentioned earlier, there's almost always a demonic spirit, I think. I've talked to so many in the LGBT community, well, that have come out rather of the LGBT community, that have said, I know I had a demonic spirit.
Yes. Yes, I can easily see that. Well, I'm hoping that maybe people that's watching the video will be able to be strengthened, because everything in our culture is moving away from what, let's say, a biblical normalcy, and into just accepting this transgendering, which is supported by a large segment of our culture now, the woke culture, and but it's devastating to the people eventually. And we know the suicide rates, mental illness rates, homelessness rates, addiction rates are rather startling and frightening. And I'm glad for your testimony, Laura. So I want people to see the twoprisms.com. They can see a picture of you and your story, and many people, many other people who have come out of either the queer community, LGBTQ plus, and from the transgender as well. And I'm hoping people will go to Amazon.com. All you got to do is type Laura Perry, Perry, in there, and her book's going to come out, and you can get it. And
Just one quick.
I would get a bunch of copies, frankly. I'd get about a dozen copies of her book, so you can read one, and then pass the rest around to people who are going to be incredibly glad to read this book. Wow.
Just wanted to mention real quick, there are, because Laura Perry is kind of a common name, there is a Laura Perry author that is very into New Age and all that is not me. So
okay,
yeah.
You got to get the right
so
Laura
that may
Perry.
Come up. Yeah.
Got to get the right Laura Perry.
Right.
All right, Laura, the Lord bless you. Thank you for
God bless you too.
being on our program.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.